Hi, I'm Dr. Chris Danielson, instructor of low brass at Westfield State University. I'm also the principal trombone of the Valley Winds and the New England Repertory Orchestra. In this video, I'll walk you through some tips that will help you prepare for the upcoming district band and orchestra auditions. Let's start with the solo. Joseph-Édouard Barrault was a French composer, and his piece Andante et Allegro, which means slowish and fast, has been a long-standing piece of choral repertoire for both the trombone and the euphonium. It features a great deal of contrast. The opening Andante section is constantly fluctuating between loud and soft and slow and fast. The brisker Allegro section builds momentum throughout until a definitive forte closing. It's important to listen to great recorded examples of this piece. I'd suggest Jeremy Wilson on YouTube, and other pieces in the same style. Try listening to Bozza's Ballade for trombone, Tomasi's Concerto for trombone, Guillemot's Morceau symphonique, and Jongen's Aria et Polonaise. Absorb the style and apply it to your own interpretation of this classic. Next, I'm going to give you 3 specific tips on some of the trickier technical aspects of this piece. One of the most intimidating things about the Barrault's Andante et Allegro are the rhythms in the opening section. The first step in decoding these triplets is to break them down into simpler chunks. Let's start with the first one. The tempo is slow, so it's important to feel 8th note subdivisions of the beat. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Before playing the rhythm as written, practice leaving out the first high and the second and third notes of the triplets. You should now be playing a note on each 8th note subdivision. Next, practice as written, but still without the tie. Remember, each 16th note triplet takes the time of 1/8 note, and practicing with a metronome is always time well spent. Once this feels easy, play as written with the tie. Now, repeat this process with measures 4 and 5. This confusing non-uplet rhythm is really just an 8th note triplet where each note of the triplet is divided into 3. Here you need to practice feeling the 8th note subdivisions except for beat 2, where you need to feel an 8th note triplet. 1 and triplet, 3 and 4 and 1. Practice playing this passage without the first tie and leaving out the second and third notes of the 3 triplets. Once you can play it like this, put the tie and the missing triplet notes back in. Although it's important to play the rhythms correctly, in this style of music, some flexibility in tempo is expected, and it's okay to play the non-uplet a little slow, as long as it's faster than the triplet notes in measure 2 and 3. One of the most notable features of the Andante is the frequent tempo changes. It's important to know what all the tempo indications mean and how that translates to metronome markings. The first one, lent, quarter note equals 52, is the main tempo for the Andante. Lent is a French term that means to play slowly, and I usually go even slower than the 52 that's marked, more like quarter note equals 48. The next indication is less obvious, poco più vivo. This is Italian and translates to a little more lively. I aim for quarter note equals 65 in this section. Whatever speed you go, it's important that there's a noticeable increase in tempo starting in measure 10. Measure 17 sees the return of the original Lent tempo, quarter note equals 52, or 48 for me. Things change again in measure 21, which is marked più vivo. This means more lively, and it's worth noting that this time it doesn't include the poco. I interpret this to mean that the tempo here is even faster, and even though it's not marked, I like to speed up through these two measures to make the following rit, short for ritardando, meaning slowing down, more impactful. I start at quarter note equals 70 and speed up significantly. The next section, starting at measure 24, is once again marked più vivo, but this time it includes a tempo indication of quarter note equals 72 through 76. I would aim to play on the faster side. I go closer to quarter note equals 85. Since this is the most energetic section of the movement, and I'm always trying to create contrast with the slower sections that came before. The andante movement closes with a return to the lent tempo. I allow this final lent to drag, which allows the movement to wind down before jumping into the allegro. I'll demonstrate a little bit of each of these sections at the tempos I suggest. Hopefully this paraphrase will help you to hear these sections as part of a cohesive arc, rather than a collection of unrelated bits and pieces. The fanfare-like opening material of the allegro section of the Barat, measures 60 through 67, presents a perfect opportunity to discuss a classic rhythm trap. This passage, like the entire allegro movement, includes both dotted 8th 16th note rhythms and triplet 8th notes. Many students make the mistake of playing the 16th note early and long, making it sound like a triplet rhythm instead of a 16th note rhythm. Make sure the 16th note is short, crisp, and placed exactly on the 4th subdivision of the beat. A trick to help make a distinction between these two rhythms is to leave a tiny bit of space after the dotted 8th, playing it instead like an 8th note followed by a 16th note rest, then the written 16th note. As a contrast, play the notes of the triplet rhythm with no space between them. This will help the two rhythms to sound different and leave no doubt that they are subdivided correctly. I'll demonstrate this dotted rhythm with no space, then with the space that I suggest so you can hear the difference. Then I'll play the entire passage. I like to tell my students that the scales part of the audition is the easiest place to get points. This is because most students do a poor job of preparing their scales. Get these scales memorized as soon as possible and run through them every time you take your horn out of the case. Some of these scales go kind of high. If high B flat isn't easy for you yet, don't worry. You can build up to it systematically while practicing these scales. The first step is to realistically determine how high you can play comfortably. Let's say that's F above the staff. Practice all the scales, but don't play higher than an F. For all the notes that are higher than an F, replace them with Fs. Do this for a week or two, then add the next note of the scale, F sharp or G. Once that becomes comfortable, keep adding notes every week or two until you can make it up to high B flat. I've written this entire thing out for you so you can try it out. Another challenge is chromatic scales. My suggestion for practicing this chromatic scale is to work one triplet at a time, including the first note of the next triplet as well. Repeat each triplet several times before moving on to the next one. Next, practice larger groupings like 2 triplets or 4 triplets. Really focus on the first note of each triplet. These notes will be your guideposts when you put the entire scale together. I've given lessons to many students who didn't know what the fourth valve on their euphonium was for. Some horns have the fourth valve on the top, up here, and some have it on the side, down here. Works the same either way. In addition to allowing you to play some new lower notes, it gives you more access to valve combinations that are better in tune. Instead of playing 1 and 3 for C and low F, play 4. And instead of playing 1, 2, and 3 for B and low E, play 2 and 4. Always use these fingerings. They are always much better in tune. If your horn doesn't have 4 valves, don't worry, you can still play everything you need to for this audition. The only way to get better at sight reading is to do it. Do a little bit every day using etude books such as Arbon, Rochu, Bloom, Slamma, and Submara. There's an endless supply of music out there. Playing duets is also a great way to work on this skill. My sight reading improved tremendously when I joined a community band that didn't rehearse and played a new set of music every week. When you prepare to sight read, make sure you check out all the important information the score gives you before you try to play it. Many people find the acronym STARS, S-T-A-R-S, helpful in doing this. S is for key signature. Make sure you check the key signature. T is for time signature and tempo. A is for accidentals. Scan the passage to see if there are accidentals you need to watch out for. R is for rhythm. Do you see any confusing rhythms that you should figure out before you start? The last S is for signs and symbols. Look at any articulations, slurs, ties, crescendos, first and second endings, and anything else on the page. Once you've scanned for all these things, find the hardest looking spot, think about how fast you can play it, and start at that tempo. Thank you so much for checking out this video. I hope that these tips are helpful, and good luck at your audition. We can't wait to see you at Westfield State. Now go practice.